Hello and welcome to another episode of Min's Minute Modcast. And today my amazing super guest is Raj.
Hey Min, how are you?
I'm doing well. Now this is a very exciting one because this is actually our 100th Modcast. So thank you very much for being the inspiration for setting up these podcasts and giving me all these wonderful ideas right from the start.
Well, as a Coley, I'm quite used to hitting centuries, so pleased to be here.
My first question is, you've had a very diverse career, going from your medical background to what you're doing now in the world of entrepreneurship. Can you take us through that journey and what your thinking was as you went across that and some of the things you learned along the way?
Yeah, sure. So I guess my journey into being a doctor wasn't that straightforward. I have or had as well very elderly parents, so I kind of straddled being a teenager and also being very conscious of chronic ailments and of them and their friends. So I was very much kind of exposed to that world of people getting older and having increased need. And also my parents were actually very compassionate people, and I think that's something they drove in me very early on, is a strong sense of compassion and empathy, and therefore it seemed like quite a natural career choice. I think it was actually accelerated for me because I was diagnosed with a serious illness in my A-level years, which was treated and resolved. However, it really then sparked my kind of real passion to join medicine and to maybe do things a bit differently.
What was the transition from being a doctor, being a surgeon, to then saying, okay, that's cool, but now I'm going to go into the world of innovation and startups and building your own business there?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I've learned things in the last few years which have actually put a huge amount of sort of explanation behind my journey so far, because it's certainly not been a linear one. I think actually I would say that I didn't really enjoy medical school. I kind of lost my way in medical school. I forgot why I was doing it. And that's because it was quite a bookish environment, very academic, didn't necessarily suit me. There were elements of medicine that I aspired to in terms of the communication and so on, and I don't think I got that much experience of it at medical school. And actually it wasn't until after medical school when I graduated as a doctor and I started working in wards and with teams of other doctors and nurses and physios and patients, that I really began to develop a passion for the medical career again. And I took an interesting path even within medicine. So I began training as a trauma and orthopedics to become a surgeon. And then about 4 years into that, I decided that actually the lifestyle of a surgeon and that level of commitment 24/7 wasn't something that was suited to me. And I made the pivot into general practice, which amused my surgical colleagues no end at the time, I remember. But it was the right decision. And I loved working with general practice. Particularly, I feel it's a really privileged profession where people will share their most intimate secrets and fears with you. And you develop a very close bond with patients and multiple generations within the same family. You also get to work in a team. But you're at the front end, the coalface of medicine, and you get exposed to a lot of the challenges that patients and the healthcare system has. And I guess within that career, working as a GP, I got to work in some of the most deprived areas in Europe and also some of the most affluent areas in the UK. Part of that role took me into a commissioning role, so I became involved in the teams that commission services that manage the budgets for the NHS. And I got really frustrated because I could see problems happening, but I couldn't see them being solved very fast. And there's all sorts of reasons behind why that was the case, and I'm sure there's a whole another podcast to talk about challenges within the NHS. But I wanted to be part of that change, and I thought the only way to do this is to be the solution. So for me, it was, how can we introduce video or virtual consulting to take some of the pressure off face-to-face consulting, make it more accessible for patients, make it more user-friendly for clinicians. That's what I did. I launched a telemedicine startup back in 2015. It was really hard yards. I kissed a lot of frogs. I chased a lot of rabbits. But I learned a lot over that kind of 7 to 9 year period. And actually, the hardest people to convince were fellow clinicians. They just thought that virtual consulting would never catch on. And actually, it took a pandemic to change that. Of course, the COVID pandemic happened. We were forced to embrace virtual consulting overnight. It went from sort of 5% of consultations to 93% overnight. And patients loved it, and doctors love it. Doctors love it so much they're not willing to let go of it now. And in fact, it's patients saying, "Can you see us more face to face?" And a lot of clinicians are resistant to that. So that's kind of been the journey that took me into entrepreneurship. Within that journey, I learned my strengths. I also learned some of my challenges and weaknesses, and it helped me identify the kind of people I should be surrounding myself with, the kind of people that have complementary skills. And it wasn't until that business was sold that I then took some time out to really reflect on what I'd learned and everything, and looked at my scars as well from that process. And that then helped me advise other people in that same position. So over the last 2 to 3 years, I've been advising startup founders. I've been advising institutional investors. I'm now an investor myself. And I'm working with some amazing startups, amazing founders. And I really feel that I do have value to add, but I'm also learning from them every day.